At my wedding reception, my mother-in-law grabbed the microphone and said, "I canceled your honeymoon. My son should spend that money on me." I laughed at first, thinking it was a joke, until I checked my bank account. It was empty. I knew Jacqueline, my mother-in-law, didn't like me, but I never thought she would ruin things on my wedding day. She stood there, smiling, and tapped the microphone to get everyone's attention. Then, in a proud voice, she said, "I have a special surprise for the bride and groom. I wanted to do something nice for my son, so I canceled their honeymoon." The whole room went silent. At first, I chuckled, waiting for her to say she was kidding, but then she looked straight at me and kept going. "Why waste money on a trip when my son has responsibilities? That money is better spent on family, on me." A few guests laughed nervously, thinking it was a joke, but then I had a bad feeling. I looked at my husband, Lucas, expecting him to be just as shocked as I was. He wasn't laughing, he just stared at his mother, his hands gripping the table so tightly that his knuckles turned white. My heart pounded. I grabbed my phone and checked our bank account. My hands shook as I logged in. And then I saw it. The honeymoon fund, completely gone, every cent. I felt sick, my hands turned cold. I turned to Lucas, whispering, "Tell me this isn't real." Lucas quickly pulled out his own phone and checked his account. His face darkened. "My account is empty," he muttered. Jacqueline stood there, still smiling, as if she expected applause. I wanted to scream, but before I could do anything, Lucas stood up. And what he said next made Jacqueline regret everything. I was furious. The money we had saved, plus the wedding gifts from friends and family, it was all gone. Lucas's face was unreadable, but I could tell he was just as angry. Jacqueline, looking proud of herself, flipped her hair and rolled her eyes. "Oh, stop being dramatic," she said. "I moved the money where it should be. You're married now, it's time to take care of your family." Lucas took a deep breath, his hands shook with anger. "Where's the money, Mom?" Jacqueline sighed like we were being ridiculous, then she said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "I put it in my account. Of course, I needed it for something important." People around us gasped. My maid of honor, Sarah, looked horrified. I clenched my fists, my voice shaking. "You stole our honeymoon money." Jacqueline laughed. "Stole? Oh, honey, don't be so dramatic. That money should be used for something more responsible, like my son supporting his mother. I raised him, I deserve it." I was so angry I could barely breathe. Lucas didn't even look surprised. Instead, he calmly pulled out a chair, sat down, and leaned forward with his elbows on the table. His voice was quiet but firm. "Mom, tell me exactly what you spent our money on." Jacqueline grinned, thinking she was in control. "Well," she said, counting on her fingers, "I paid off my credit cards, I put a deposit on a new luxury SUV, and oh, I booked myself a cruise, the penthouse suite, of course." She said it so casually, like she hadn't just stolen our honeymoon. Lucas took a deep breath, tapping his fingers on the table. Then, to my surprise, he smiled. But it wasn't a happy smile. It was the kind of smile people have right before things take a turn for the worse. "That's great, Mom," he said slowly, "that's really, really great." Jacqueline blinked. What do you mean?" Lucas leaned in closer. "I mean it's great that you spent money that wasn't yours, because do you know what that means?" The room went silent. Lucas pulled out his phone, tapped the screen a few times, and then turned it so Jacqueline could see. He was calling the bank. "Hi," he said, staring straight at Jacqueline. "I'd like to report fraud on my account." Jacqueline's smile disappeared, her eyes widened. "Lucas, what are you doing?" Lucas ignored her. "Yes, I want to dispute several unauthorized transactions," he said. He listened for a second, then nodded. "I know exactly who did it. I can give you their name and account number." Jacqueline jumped up from her seat. "Lucas, stop, you can't." "Oh, I can," he said, still smiling. "You're not on my account, you had no right to touch my money, that means you stole it, and banks take fraud very seriously." Jacqueline's face turned red, the guests stared in shock, some even started recording. Lucas tilted his head. "I wonder what the bank will do when they investigate." He tapped his phone again. "Oh, and I should probably call the cruise line too, since you booked that trip with stolen money." Jacqueline gasped. "Lucas, I'm your mother, you wouldn't." "I would." The whole room was watching. Jacqueline looked around and realized something. Nobody, not a single person, was on her side. I could see it in Jacqueline's face, the slow realization that she had completely messed up, but Lucas wasn't finished. He turned to me, took my hand, and gave it a squeeze, then he looked back at his mother. "Oh, and Mom?" he said. Jacqueline swallowed. What? Lucas smirked. Remember that prenup you told me not to sign? The one you said was pointless? She blinked. Of course. Lucas's smirk grew. Well, I signed it anyway. Jacqueline froze. She looked like she might faint. Lucas shrugged. And guess what? One of the rules is that our accounts stay separate. So, you didn't just steal from me, you stole from my wife. Jacqueline's face turned pale. Now, she knew she wasn't just dealing with her son, she was dealing with me, and I was ready to make her regret everything. She looked around, hoping someone would defend her, but no one did. Her voice wavered. J.L. Lucas, sweetheart, let's not take this too far. But Lucas was done. He put his phone on speaker as the bank rep returned. Sir, we've flagged the transactions. Since the recipient is a different account holder, we can escalate this as fraud. Would you like us to proceed with a full investigation? Jacqueline lunged forward, trying to grab his phone. Lucas, hang up, let's talk. Lucas leaned away, his voice cold. Yeah, proceed. Jacqueline gasped. You wouldn't do this to your own mother. Lucas just stared at her. You did this to yourself. The bank rep continued. Understood. We'll reverse the charges and notify authorities. The recipient's account will be temporarily frozen during the investigation. If confirmed as fraud, legal action may follow. Jacqueline screamed. Legal action? No, stop them. Lucas, fix this. But Lucas wasn't finished. Oh, don't worry, Mom, he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. I'll make sure you don't get arrested, yet. He smirked. But the money? That's gone. You won't see a single cent of it. Jacqueline's face twisted with rage, and then, she did something nobody expected. She spun toward me, her eyes wild. This is your fault, she shrieked. You turned my son against me. He never would have done this before you came along. I stood firm. I didn't make you steal from us, you did that yourself. Jacqueline's eyes darted around, but all she saw were disgusted stares. Then, suddenly, her expression changed. She smiled, a slow, creepy smile. Fine, she said sweetly, if I can't have the money, then neither can you. Before I could react, she grabbed her phone and started typing frantically. I stepped closer, my heart pounding. What are you doing? Jacqueline grinned. Oh, just making a little phone call, she said. I may not have access to your bank accounts, but I still have my ways. She pressed the call button. Her voice was fake and sugary sweet. Hi, yes, this is Jacqueline. I need to report a stolen credit card. My stomach dropped. I knew exactly what she was doing. She was trying to freeze our joint wedding account, blocking the honeymoon money we had just recovered. I lunged forward. You're crazy. But Lucas was faster. He grabbed the phone from her hands and put it on speaker. Ma'am, the fraud department rep said, you're reporting a stolen card. Can you confirm the account holder's name? Jacqueline hesitated. She glanced at me, then at Lucas. Lucas raised an eyebrow. Go on, Mom, tell them whose account you're reporting. Jacqueline swallowed. Well, it's my son's account and. The bank rep interrupted. Ma'am, unless you are the account holder, you cannot report fraud. False claims have legal consequences. Jacqueline's face went pale. She looked around desperately, realizing she had just made things worse. Lucas? He just laughed. A low, slow chuckle that made me feel proud. Oh, Mom, he said, shaking his head. You really can't stop yourself, can you? Jacqueline's face turned bright red. She was shaking. Before she could say anything, her phone buzzed. She grabbed it, looked at the screen, and froze. Lucas smirked. Is that the bank? She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Then, a family friend stood up and cleared his throat. Jacqueline, he said, arms crossed. You do know I'm a lawyer, right? Jacqueline's eyes widened. And what you just did? That was attempted fraud. You did it in front of 50 witnesses. People started whispering. Some nodded in agreement. Jacqueline stumbled back. I wasn't. The lawyer held up a hand. Save it. You should handle this before it gets worse. Jacqueline turned to Lucas. Desperate. Honey, you won't let them do this to me, right? Lucas looked at her for a long moment. Then he smiled. You did this to yourself. Jacqueline let out a choked sob. Lucas, please. But Lucas just shrugged. Enjoy your new vacation, Mom, he said. It might not be a cruise, but I hear jail cells have a great view. Jacqueline's face crumpled. And in that moment, she knew she had lost. Jacqueline stood there, frozen, her face drained of color, hands trembling at her sides. She had lost control, and she knew it. But that didn't mean she was done. Oh, come on, she scoffed, forcing a laugh. Are you really going to ruin your wedding day over a little misunderstanding? I stepped forward. A misunderstanding? My voice shook, not with fear, but with fury. You stole from us, you took our honeymoon money, spent it on yourself, and then tried to commit bank fraud in front of 50 people. That's not a misunderstanding, that's a crime. Jacqueline's fake smile twitched. But I wasn't finished. You act like we owe you something, I said, my voice rising. Like your son's money, our money, belongs to you. But guess what, Jacqueline? I tilted my head. It doesn't. A few guests clapped. Jacqueline's head snapped around, glaring at the people who dared to side with me. But it wasn't just the crowd she was losing control of her son. Lucas folded his arms. You know what, Mom? He let out a sharp breath. This is actually the perfect time to say something I've been holding back for a long time. Jacqueline stiffened. What? Lucas didn't look away. I've been done with you for a while. The only reason I still spoke to you was because I thought, stupidly, that you could change. But you can't, and after tonight, I'm cutting you off. Jacqueline's eyes bulged. Why, you don't mean that? Lucas's voice was steady. I do. She gasped like he had slapped her. The room was silent, everyone waiting to see how this would end. Lucas turned to me, took my hand, and kissed my fingers before facing Jacqueline again. You took our money, he said, so now, I'm taking something from you. Jacqueline swallowed hard. You don't have a son anymore. A few people audibly gasped. Jacqueline's entire body shook. You don't mean that, she whispered. Lucas didn't flinch. I do, after tonight. I want nothing to do with you. No calls, no visits, no texts. If you ever try to contact me or my wife again, I'll file a restraining order. Jacqueline's breaths came in short, panicked gasps. No, Lucas, you can't do this. I'm your mother, I raised you. Lucas's expression hardened. And you just showed me exactly what kind of mother you are. Jacqueline cracked, her face twisted, her body trembling, and then, like a child throwing a tantrum, she screamed, a full-on, blood-curdling scream. Jacqueline stomped her foot, shaking with anger. You ungrateful little. Lucas ignored her. He took my hand and smiled. Come on, babe, let's go enjoy the rest of our wedding. And just like that, we walked away, leaving Jacqueline standing there, humiliated and completely alone. The next morning, everything fell apart for Jacqueline. The bank returned all the money she stole. Every single dollar went back into our accounts. Her deposit for the luxury car? Cancelled. Her fancy cruise? Gone. Her own bank froze her accounts because of the fraud investigation. She couldn't access her money for weeks. The police paid her a visit. While she wasn't arrested, she was warned that if she tried anything like this again, she'd face real charges. But the worst part for Jacqueline? Everyone found out. News of what she did spread quickly. Family and friends cut her off. People stopped talking to her. Even some of her own relatives wanted nothing to do with her. And the final blow? 3 months later, Lucas and I finally went on our honeymoon, a dream trip to Greece, fully upgraded, first class, and completely paid for by wedding guests who hated Jacqueline so much. They sent us extra money just to spite her. We posted pictures, lots of them. And Jacqueline? She saw every single one. According to one of Lucas's cousins, she cried about it for weeks. Jacqueline lost everything that day, her son, her reputation, her control, and the best part? She did it to herself. As for Lucas and me, we've never been happier. We're building a life without her, and we have zero regrets. Because the best revenge? Is living well. And Jacqueline? She'll have to live with the consequences of her own actions, forever.